Welcome to this episode of the Talent Forge, where we are shaping the future of training and development. Today, my special guest is Deborah Heiser, Dr. Deborah Heiser. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
I am too, Deborah, and we're going to dig into mentorship. But before we do that, I'd love for the audience to have a chance to get to know you just a little bit. So tell us your story. How'd you get into mentorship, talent development? Where do you begin?
Well, it was a long journey, to be quite honest with you. It started with me working in the field of aging. And most people say, how could that have led to mentoring? But I was studying and researching everything no one ever wants to have, which is like depression, Alzheimer's, frailty, etc. And I went to a conference and someone said to me, what do we have to look forward to as we age? And I didn't have an answer for him.
Mm,
I was like, less depression,
that's a
less
tough
frailty.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was an aha moment for me. So I had to take a look at everything I was researching. And it made me think, what do I have to look forward to? You know, beyond research. So when I went back to the books, I found all of the developmental research that existed, and I'm an applied developmental psychologist. So this was, going back to my roots and taking it beyond childhood. And what I was able to find is that there's a lot of rich information out there, studies that have been more than 75 years old, but people weren't paying attention to it.
Mm,
So in midlife, we're built to want to give back. And I found that out and started really researching it. And one of the ways we give back is mentoring. So we
mm.
have three ways we can give back: mentoring, volunteering, or philanthropy. And not everyone can, really get meaning out of the dollar that we may give away here and there, and can't put a name on a building. When we volunteer, it's someone else's idea. We still usually engage in it anyway. But mentoring is a piece of us that we take and we give to somebody else. So that's where I ended up landing on this and then ran with it because it's just
Love that.
unbelievable to be able to look at, the nameless, faceless person who's the mentor that we've all heard go get a mentor, but we don't know who that is. And to look at that person.
Oh, I can't wait to dig into this. And I have so many questions for you. I want to share a couple of quick things, and I love that. I love the work that you're doing. So I have my father's in the late stages of Alzheimer's and dementia. My sister's a caretaker, and I'm a part-time caretaker. Every now and then, I'll have him here at my place for a couple of nights. But I also do a lot of work in consulting. I'll give a quick shout out to the area agencies on aging here in Michigan. So I do a lot of work with them and support them as best as I possibly can. Obviously, it's something near and dear to my heart. So first, I just want to say thank you because the work that you're doing is obviously very, very meaningful and impactful to not only your clients, but to also some of us that are in that space and experiencing some of that as well. So awesome and kudos to you. Um, Second, okay, mentorship, because this always, I think, and I'm going to say it, gets screwed up. I have seen so many organizations launch mentorship programs that are absolute abject failures that by the time that the first year rolls around, they just cut it. And part of it is that the mentors aren't ready, part of it that the mentees aren't knowing what to expect or anything else. Sometimes they walk into it and it's like, okay, is this a psychologist that's going to mentor me into my position or my life? Is this a coach? Is this a guru that's sitting on the mountaintop? So, uh, Deborah, can you help us understand what is it
Yeah.
that sort of like classifies a mentor versus a coach versus a
Mhm.
colleague or something of that nature? Can you help us understand that?
Yeah. There's so much to unpack, and I'm so excited to be able to talk about this. Because when we think of mentorship and we think of work, it's a transactional relationship. And usually the mentor is left out of it. It's just some like, if you say, who's the mentor you're going for? People are like, I don't know, somebody a couple of levels above me. Or they'll match you. But how many times, if you're on a dating app, do you swipe? Do you pick the first one and say, I'm going with them? No. But we expect that to be the case with a mentor. And this mentor is supposed to be all knowing. It's like Yoda, that's out there and ready to just sit there and devote everything to that person in a way that, feels like a therapist and feels like a coach and all of the things that we would ever want in some fictitious person like
Right.
Yoda or something. So anyway, when I was doing the research, I found that people were looking at mentoring as transactional, and mentoring isn't. Really, it has about five things involved in it, and this is where, if we break it down, we can find out where it doesn't work in the workplace.
Hmm.
So first off, before we start anything, if you're getting paid to mentor, you're not a mentor. So if you are at work and it is required of you, you are not a mentor. You are an employee. Maybe you're an advisor. You could be a coach. You could be, but you're not a mentor. And this makes a
Sure.
lot of people mad because they say, well, I'm mentoring too. And I say, are you getting paid? And they say, yeah. And I say, then you're not a mentor. And so
And
let
you're
me let
you're
me go.
managing, you're not mentoring
Yes, you're
at
doing your
that point in
job.
time. Right. Yeah.
Right? It's like
Sure.
saying, if you're a parent, do you love your child? Well, yes, you're supposed to. Like, you don't get extra for that.
Well,
So,
that makes a lot of sense too in terms of the way that you've structured giving back, right? I'm not giving back because it is transactional. It's not me doing
yeah,
this out of the kindness of my heart. I have some kind of organizational, corporate, or financial value
right.
in lieu of my time and energy that I'm dedicating to somebody else. So that makes total sense. I could see how some people would push back. Well, I am mentoring. I have
Mhm.
3 direct reports that I'm mentoring. Okay,
Yeah.
well, let's rephrase that. So I'm sorry, continue on. I thought that was super interesting.
So if we start with it, there's a term called generativity, and this is an emotional developmental stage we hit in midlife. Most of us think of aging as a steep incline of our physical abilities and then a slow, steady decline. That's why no one likes to think and talk about aging, because we think of midlife and beyond as, a decline. But what most people don't know is that our emotional trajectory only goes up, it never ever goes down. You can expect to be happier when you're older, and just everything emotionally gets better. It never declines. In midlife, when we're starting to decline physically, our emotion hits a point where we say, wow, I've accumulated all of this knowledge and expertise and wisdom. I want to give it back. So, to the world, I want a piece of me to live on. It's more than a legacy. It's that we're saying, hey, I want to see that I mattered, that my life has meaning, that I'm not just here taking up space. Why did I check all those boxes off? So when we're in the workplace or at home, this is where we feel a need in midlife. By the time you're 50, this is when most people reach it. And I'll give you an example of what this looks like when a person doesn't. So Ebenezer Scrooge is the guy who had everything. He was a self-made guy. He lived in a mansion. Servants took care of all of his needs, and he was miserable. He didn't reach that generative stage. You can see when he did, because when he took on Tiny Tim and Bob Cratchit's family, that's when he experienced joy. He was giving back. That's
Hmm.
generativity. So we're all doing this. We just don't think about it. The other thing is that there's something called intrinsic motivation. Now, we all are intrinsically motivated to do things. If you love reading, no one has to say, hey, I'll give you $5 if you read a book. If you play a sport, if you do whatever it is that you enjoy, you don't need pay for it. And
And interesting.
this is,
And yeah, I was going to say interesting. Daniel Pink's work actually shows
yeah.
transactional value in something that we have intrinsic drive for decreases the intrinsic drive to
So,
do it, which is
yeah,
super fascinating as well.
absolutely. Yeah, he hit the nail on the head with that. The example I always give is how often, I'll ask my class when I teach, how many of you would go volunteer at a soup kitchen? And they all raise their hand. And then I say, okay, how many of you would take that same time and volunteer at Starbucks? And they all say, I would never do that. And that's just the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So you want to go, you feel great after you volunteer at a soup kitchen, but you'd feel like a schmuck at Starbucks giving away your time for free. Same people, the hungry and thirsty, but the motivation is different. Now, this is the key part at work, one of the key parts, because when you're at work and your motivation is your paycheck or your performance review or something else like that, it is an extrinsic motivator. It's
Mhm.
like a sudden, you go down in your desire to do it. It's a burden. It's an extra box to check as opposed to doing something that you love. And another thing at work that's a big issue is trust. No one ever wants to let their boss or someone a couple levels above think they don't know everything. An example I always give with that is I was talking to federal judges in Iowa, and one of them who was retiring said, yeah, there's a problem with judges because they have to be able to, communicate that they know everything. Who wants a judge that doesn't know what the case, how do you, you have to have trust in this. It would be like a doctor and they don't know what they're doing. You don't want to hear that. So what they did was they set it up so they could have a feeling of trust. So they did lunches where people could turn to the side and say, "Oh, hey, Jim or Mary, I know you had a case like this. Can you tell me about it?" It took away all of that feeling of vulnerability that you often get in a workplace where you feel like so and so is going to tell somebody that I stink at this or I don't know what I'm doing. As soon as you remove that, I usually say insert lateral mentoring there where you're not looking to somebody a couple levels above, but you're looking to somebody to your right or to your left. And that is
Hmm.
where, if you can insert that into a workplace, lunches, water cooler talks, Zoom meetings, retreats, conferences, whatever, you're going to, end up having more mentoring.
I picked up on something you said there too, which I found to be really interesting, is right. Like if we're in the mentee position, we don't want to look like we don't know just as much as if you're in the mentor position, you don't want to look like you don't know. And there's this perception game. There's this, I got to make sure that I'm not putting myself in future risk of somebody, this mentor of mine going back to the boss and being like, this person's never going to get it. So
Right.
uh, there's almost like this disincentive for any kind of vulnerability or any kind of like openness in
Yeah.
communication. So it seems like that's almost like bi-directional. So not only am I not going to disclose something, but I'm also not going to acknowledge or admit that I don't know something.
You're
So
the
that's
only one to ever pick up on that. That
mm,
is, you are so right, and I often forget to mention that. We feel like mentorship is reciprocal or in a way that is transactional, right? So the mentor has to trust that the mentee is going to take their valuable knowledge and information and they're
mm.
not going to just discard it. If I give you a gift and I say, "Oh, hey, Jay, I have this gift for you," and you're like, I've got enough gifts. I'm good. I'll feel totally horrible. I have to
Right.
trust that you're going to want to open that gift and that you'll think that something that I give you is of value to you. Um, and so when we think of that and what the mentor is going to get from it, that's a big deal. So
Mm.
that's sort of what you're talking about. Trust has to go in both ways. I have to trust that I'm not just throwing my information out, like a knowledge slut, I guess. Sorry,
I
but
love it.
just throwing it around everywhere to everyone. I want to
Sure.
feel like it's landing with someone who cares.
That goes back to your concept of purpose, right? Like the knowledge that I'm sharing is valuable. I've earned this knowledge over the course of my
Yeah,
midlife. And at this point in time, if you're not taking that seriously, you're not taking my entire
right.
experience or my
Yeah.
existence serious. So
Mhm.
why am I having this conversation? I could totally see why that would be really disruptive for a mentor.
Yeah, you'd feel like, oh, all those boxes I checked didn't ever matter. All that matters is that a cog in this wheel at work. I'm just, some tiny piece, and that's it. And what a mentee does for a mentor is it makes their world feel huge. When I'm mentoring and someone takes my information, I feel like 1,000 times bigger and bolder and whatever because wow, they like my information, they think it's important, they want to use it. It's the same as when you, like I mentioned, you give a gift or you expose someone to something and their eyes turn wide open and they're so thrilled with it. It's an absolutely amazing feeling.
Hmm, I love that. So we had mentioned these different things of what kind of keeps us out of it being mentorship. If I was to ask you, because I know that a lot of our HR people, a lot of our trainers, talent development folks have probably seen some level of mentorship within their organizations. Would you advise, all right, let's reframe that. Let's not call it mentorship. Or is there a way to do this sort of in a corporate or organizational setting that's meaningful and impactful for both mentor and mentee?
Yeah, I think as soon as a person is able to see the real, have more of a definition of what mentorship really is, then it's easy.
Hmm.
So if you have generativity, intrinsic motivation, you have trust, a meaningful connection, people have to like each other. It's like swiping, you have to like the person, and there has to be a goal. Yeah, otherwise, you're just chit chatting. If you have those five things, then you have real mentorship, and those are easy to accomplish in the workplace. So if you are in the workplace and you're saying, I want to, make sure that I'm making mentorship available to people, there are some things that you can do that are really set up to be good lateral mentoring that requires no money. That is just setting up lunchtime where people can meet and talk, where you can talk to somebody next to you, removes all of that vulnerability, vulnerability issues that you have. If you have people who want to mentor, we have to remember that the mentorship is coming from the mentor who wants to give it away, not the mentee who's grabbing and saying, I want.
Hmm.
So as long as you can have people who want to mentor who say, and this has happened at IBM, Irene Yakubis went to work on her third day. Someone said, I'm happy to mentor anyone. She raised her hand, said, I'd like some. And they remained mentor mentee for a long time. So if you can have people who would like to mentor, this feels good to them and they aren't getting a performance review for it. They're not having any extrinsic motivator put on it, then have them make that announcement in a way that they'd like, in the way that they want to give back, so that a mentee can say, that's my person. There we go.
So more of a voluntary, sometimes lateral, or at least creating the safe space for those types of conversations to occur. So that way it's not necessarily pressured or pressurized. Now, in that lateral mentorship, have you experienced or seen, right? And this is something that, like, especially in my management training program, what I see often, one of my biggest questions is, yesterday we were lateral. Today I'm leading that person as their manager. And that is a huge transitional shift. Do you ever see anything in sort of like that lateral mentorship opportunity where maybe there is a little guarding or potential guarding because, hey, we might both be going up for that promotion in a year or 2 years or 3 years?
Then
I
it's
don't know.
Yeah, then it's not a mentor.
Okay,
And I
perfect.
hear this in finance. Hedge fund people will say, I'm not
Mm,
sharing anything with anybody. We eat what we kill, that kind of a thing.
yeah.
That may not apply to
Scarcity,
everyone.
super
Yes.
scarce. Yeah, scarcity
But
mentality rather than abundance.
I'm
Sure.
going to give you an example of two examples, real quick, of what lateral mentoring looks like, because most people think that it can't be put in places.
Mm,
So imagine it's 2003 and the Columbia Space Shuttle disintegrates to the horror of everyone who's watching. Now, fast forward to 2005, you're an astronaut in space. You're out there and you're like, yippee, this is great. Everything I've ever dreamed of. I've always wanted to be an astronaut. And then you get a call from NASA. Hey, there might be the same problem that the Columbia shuttle had. Well, you can't open the door and say, I'm out of here. You have to figure it out. So
right.
in that case, Charlie Camarda, who was the astronaut on the STS 114, said, hey, I don't feel like calling my boss. They just told me there could be a problem, but they're not sure. So he didn't have that trust, right? So he
Hmm.
called somebody that he knew that was a lateral mentor and said, am I going to live or die? Do I call my family, or is there something we can do? And that person said, let me take a look. Let's work this out. They worked it out. They found out they needed to do a spacewalk. So Charlie presented that to his team. They called NASA. They said, we're doing a spacewalk. They survived. They came home. In the case of, now that's lateral mentoring. He did not have that trust. Now he could go at a different point in time and have trust in somebody above him, but not then when he was in space.
Right.
So we should and could have a bazillion different mentors at any time. So you don't just look to your right and say, "Oh, there's only one person. There's Jim. That will be my mentor." We look around. We have to really, Charlie said he keeps a little black book of all the people that are most important to him that he trusts in the world. And he took that into space, and I call that his potential lateral mentor book.
Mm.
and we all have that. We all
Yeah.
do it. All of our friends, all of our colleagues have different expert areas of expertise. Now, Latanya Kilpatrick at Colgate Palmolive, she is a global SVP, and so she has a ton of patents. They're looking at oral health in many different ways. And so she was looking, and she's high up. And a lot of people who are high up say, I don't have anybody above me who can mentor me when I hit a wall. And so what she did was she was at a conference, regular old conference, and she met somebody who worked in dog food, something in dog food. And when she hit her wall, she said, I wonder if that person who's studying dog food, and how it works for dogs, would understand the microbiomes of humans. So she called her, and the woman said, yeah, here's where we are. They applied that to human beings and made a huge breakthrough in oral health for humans. So that's a lateral mentor. She trusted her. There was no conflict there.
Right.
It was a completely different area. So we can go pretty far out with our lateral mentors. They don't have to be where we work, they can be in another job altogether where somebody has no conflict there. So it's really being very creative in how we acknowledge that mentors are all around us.
I'm going to dig back into that in just a few moments here, but I want to ask a question. So here's one of the things that I've experienced both in an organization that they had said, "Hey, we want to launch this membership pro or mentorship program." And this is a membership organization. In theory, most of the people are lateral. Some people obviously had more experience and so on and so forth. So they recruited. They said, "Hey, anybody that's open to being a mentor," and a number of people threw their name into the hat. After that occurred, they said, members, if you're looking for membership, we'll match you with a mentor. Now, they did make a mistake and it was first come, first serve, and you're assigned a mentor. It wasn't right, swipe left. It was just like, oh, you'd be a great fit for this person. You happen to be in the same time zone, or you'd be a great fit for this person. You both study behavioral science or whatever it was, right? So I can already see that that was a mistake and an error on the organizational's part. When the actual mentoring happened, and this was feedback that had come back after some surveys and some focus groups after it was done, some of the things that had occurred was the mentor wasn't sure what to share. They didn't know what was valuable. They didn't know what to tell them or how to advise them or anything else. The mentees felt like they were leading. Like it wasn't like they were only able to ask the questions that they had knowledge and experience of, but they didn't know what they didn't know. So they didn't know how to ask the right questions to get information, which, you've already said the mentee getting information is different than the mentor providing information. How would you suggest, like when you have something like that, where it is meeting a number of the different qualifications of maybe lateral, no conflict, that there is trust because this organization really does have like a lot of trust for each other inside of its membership. How do you structure something like that to make sure that the mentor is prepared to deliver on the promise of mentorship and that the mentee is maybe prepared for receivership or being in that relationship? What would be some of your best practices to make sure that that comes off without either side feeling like, well, this was a waste of my time?
Yeah. Some of them can. And I think that people think that every mentoring interaction is going to be a success. And it's just like making friends. Sometimes you're like, that's not my person. And we have to be okay with that, is number one. Number
Hmm.
two is that people have to know their job. If you went out and you made a friend with somebody and they were just like, oh, yeah, bring me my coffee, or, hey, you give to me all the time and I'm just going to sit and receive. That's not a friend. You're going to quickly leave that friendship.
Hmm.
So we have to think of mentorship in the same way. So the mentee needs to know their job. Not everybody knows, you don't know what you don't know. So it's a burden on a mentee to come in with questions because they're not going to know what they don't know yet.
Right.
The mentor, on the other hand, could feel a lot of pressure if they are there to change the life of this person. And so you have to make sure that you take away those two burdens from them. And then there can be a free flow conversation. So if the mentor is there saying, Here's the information I have that I feel confident I can bestow on you. I know the lay of the land of this big place. You want to learn the lay of the land, you're new? I'm your person. Or I know how to navigate a certain department. That's great. Then you have something that you can give. I'm just making up two things. Now,
Sure.
a
Yeah.
mentee's job in that case would be to say, I am going to be really excited to learn the lay of the land of this place. And I will be asking questions like, what happens in the culture of this company that is different from the one that I used to go to? How do people greet each other? All of the various things that happen that can be so frightening for somebody who's new or something like that. But
Yeah.
you have to give them the idea of what they're looking for. Because if the mentee comes in and they say, I expect that you are going to do all of these things for me, and the mentor's not thinking that, you're going to have a problem. So it's really just here are the rules, and they're pretty broad, but
Okay.
really just like that, you have to have that give and take ready.
But some level of structure to kind of keep
Mhm.
people to say, hey, this is what we want, this is what we don't
Yeah.
want, this is what is on the table, this is what's kind of off the table, still making it loose enough that natural human conversations can occur, but at least giving some idea of this is the pathway. Would that be a
Yeah.
fair?
A lot of people think, well, what can they share and what can't they? If I give them personal information, what are they going to share and what are they not going to share? And I like to say, because I run the mentor project, there's nothing off the table. You share something with your mentor and it can go anywhere.
Hmm.
It can be recorded. It can whatever, if you were on a one-to-one Zoom. Go into this without thinking that, because otherwise people fall into feeling like it's a therapy session and that they can, divulge all kinds of things. And that's a burden to a mentor in many cases. If you need to say, hey, I feel unsafe or I don't feel, that's one thing, but it should not be on the mentor to feel like they are your therapist. And
Yeah.
that is where, if you put those rules out in the same way, look, this is not a confidential conversation like a therapy session would be. The same as if you're meeting with a coach. A coach, that's not, it shouldn't be confidential. It should be that you're there to do, you have a goal, job related.
Right. So let's say that and let's do this bidirectionally, okay? Say I'm a person that wants to find a mentor, somebody to share their wisdom, their knowledge, and information with me. And we'll also look at the other side and say I'm somebody that has some wisdom, some knowledge, and experience that I've amassed, and I'm ready to generatively share this with the external world. So if I was in that space, in either of those spaces, what would your recommendation? Let's start with the mentee. I'm looking for a mentor that's going to help me, that's going to guide me. What would be a strategy for me to connect, find the right person, find somebody that's interested in
Right.
potentially being that for me?
So I can tell you how it works with the mentor project and how I would put it in a company. In the mentor
And real
project,
quick, if can you contextualize the mentor project? Just share with the
oh yes,
audience a little bit what that
sure,
is and then nail
absolutely.
it.
Sure. The Mentor Project is an organization that I founded along with several other people in about 5 years ago. And we're a nonprofit and we serve students around the world for free by bringing the world's top 1% experts, from astronauts to artists, to mentor students for free around the world. We've given away just this year, and we're not done with this year, more than 2 million dollars worth of mentoring hours. So if I'm when the mentees come to
It's
us,
incredible. That is
yeah,
incredible, by the way.
and this is all volunteering. Like there is only intrinsic motivation. And we started with 10 people, and people said, no one's ever going to want to donate their time for free. That's crazy. And I was like, oh, all right, well, let's just try it out. And it turned out we went from 10 to 60 within 6 months, then to 80. We have a wait list because people ask all the time if they can mentor. Generativity is what we're built to do. And it was kind of a really cool way to prove that it does work. But the mentees come to us, and the mentors come to us first, and they'll say, hey, here's what I'm good at and I like to do. We put that out there. We can put a bio up of what they do. and a picture. And then a mentee will come and they'll fill out a form and they'll say, hey, I'm looking for X. It could be that they say, I'm looking to learn if I, can do research. That we would say, oh, well, we have these researchers. Would you like to meet them? They love to mentor in that area and we can match them up. And then we'll usually, what we do is we say, try somebody outside of your area too, because you might find something you like as well. Um, so that's how we do that. If you're in the workplace, it's amazing. You would not even be able to imagine how amazing it is to be able to have a person give like a talk or to say what they're good at and what they do, because there's going to be somebody in that audience who's going to say, wow, I want to learn from that person. And they'll know what they want to learn from them. It's very hard unless you've heard somebody speak. That was an example of what Irene did. She went to a new place. She was at NASA. She went to IBM, two different cultures. Someone said, hey, I'd like to mentor. And she saw this person was amazing. She said, I want to have that person mentor me. But she knew then what she wanted. The
Mhm.
person had put it out there in a talk. So there's nothing better than being able to highlight your professionals who are working with what they're doing regularly, whether that's over Zoom, whether that's on a Slack channel, whether that's in some way. But if somebody's able to say, here's what I do, and you know what, I'm open to somebody coming to me with questions. They don't have to say, I will now mentor people, but they have an open door. And then somebody can say, I'd like to walk through that open door. And that would be what the mentee does. It's so organic feeling, and everyone feels good when you do that.
I
You're
love it.
tapping into somebody's generativity and you're tapping into somebody's like desire to accept that generativity.
I love like I don't know why, but I had this visual like image of like speed dating and mentoring, in the office,
You
like,
could do
hey, what are you
that.
good at? What are you good at? What are you interested in? And kind of having a little bit of fun with that. But I think it makes so much sense, right? Like when you're assigned, and this is how I've seen it done in so many organizations, when you're assigned a mentor, oh, this is Jay, he's been here for 20 years, he's great at his job. Let him mentor you. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you're looking for. So if it's,
Right.
hey, I'm Jay and I've done this and my background's in behavioral science and here's what I navigate is people in relationships, somebody might go, I need that help versus,
Yeah,
Deborah, who's, hey, I've set up a nonprofit, I've had this experience, I've given a TED talk, I've done this, I've done this. Somebody else is going to go, Deborah's my person. And that
that's
makes a
exactly
lot of
how it happened.
sense. I love that. So, Deborah, this is super fascinating because I think that this is an underutilized, and when it is utilized, completely, I'm not going to say mismanaged. I don't think it's intentional mismanagement or anything like that, but I think it's just not done particularly well. And I think the programs that I've seen really struggle because they are missing at least one, if not five, of the different things that you've identified as essential. Uh, if our audience wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about mentoring, or if they wanted to read your book, I'm going to give you a little nod there too. How would they reach out to you? What would they be able to do to kind of dig deeper into this question?
People can reach me at mentorproject.org. That's the Mentor Project, or deborahheiser.com. You can find me on Psychology Today. I'm a contributor there, on the right side of 40. And pretty much if you Google me, you can find me. But I really do respond to everybody who reaches out. And so I'm excited to help anybody who wants to learn more about mentoring.
It is very on brand, I think, for you to say that. And the fact that you were kind enough to be here with us today and to help shape the future. Thank you so much, Deborah. Honestly, like I've learned a lot from this conversation. And the way you frame it is just it seems so simple. Like I want to get out there and mentor now. And I
Go
want to
do
go and find my
it.
mentor, go find more mentors. But this has really been inspiring, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, audience, for listening into this episode of the Talent Forge, where together we are shaping the future of training and development.